Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Hive Jive. I am sort of kind of flying solo at the moment. Natalie decided that she's going to run off to Italy, but that is okay because we have a special guest joining us today. We have the one and only Miss Tracy Pielemeir, who is the founder of the North Central Beekeepers and the creator of Hive Butler. Welcome to the show, Tracy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk hive stuff.
Yeah, bees. And this, okay, so this is a very immediate segue into this. This is kind of ironic for you because apparently you didn't originally want to have anything to do with bees.
I didn't. And I think that makes me helpful to other new beekeepers because I had no interest whatsoever. I am an only child, so when we moved to a property with an orchard, I said to my dad, "Dad, you should be a beekeeper. Tom drinks honey in his coffee. We need honey." So my poor sweet dad became a beekeeper and we harvested honey a couple times. And then his bees flew away and he was like, I'm kind of done with that. And so all the equipment sat in my barn for a couple years and I was a homeschool mom and I was like, oh my gosh, I should do something with all that stuff. And I took my 14-year-old daughter to an all-day bee school and we learned about beekeeping and I still was like, okay, whatever. And I think it even was maybe a year after that before I invested in some nukes. And at that time, I was driving down to Indianapolis to a bee club. So a 30-minute drive one way. I bought these nukes from this lady and I installed them by myself and in that equipment, that old equipment I had. And the summer went on, and for some reason, I must not have paid attention at bee school because for some reason I thought you harvested honey in the fall. I have no idea why. So fall came, and I was like, oh, then I found out, oh no, you don't harvest it in the fall. And then I was like, okay, I just won't do anything. And so every day I would walk to the barn to feed my horses, and I'd be like, I'm a terrible person. I'm a terrible person. I can't believe I've
Don't
killed
look at the
those bees.
beehives.
They're dying. They're dying. I'm terrible. And winter came and went. And in the spring, boom, out they came. They were pouring out. I was like, oh my gosh, they lived. And now I really don't know what I'm doing. So I reached out to these random men on Facebook that were beekeepers in another town. And I said, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you come help me? And they said, yeah. And so we set this appointment date. And then the day came and the one sent me an email. He's like, you have to give me your address, right? He literally said this. And I was like, oh, I've done exactly what I tell my daughters not to do. I've reached out to a stranger on the internet and he's coming to my house. And oh my gosh. And so he came and we were walking out toward the hives and he goes, oh, you used a deep as a super. And I said, I did. I mean, I just had no idea. And so we went out there and we got in and that deep was 100% honey.
Oh, nice.
And the two of us lifted it into the wheelbarrow and it was everything I could do to wheelbarrow it to the house. It was
Yeah.
so heavy. And I think that was the beginning. Then we were like, what? This is
Yeah.
great. And we had all this honey and I was always looking for a side hustle. And I was like, okay, well, we can try this. And a friend that I went to high school with, we drove school buses together. And she was like, okay, well, let's do that. And I was like, okay. So that's how it started.
Wow. And that's actually, so if you don't mind my asking, how long ago was that initial
I believe
purchase of a
that was
couple of
in
nukes?
so she and I started that business, I think in 2013. So that
Okay.
might have been like 2011 that I initially was going to B school and all that.
Yeah. So you fast forward from there till now, you probably didn't imagine any of the rest of this coming along, did
Oh,
you?
no, 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 0. So when she and I decided that we would start a bee business, we were very motivated to make some, and we even we sat down with those two guys that came to help me. They had a legit honey business, and we went and sat down with them. We were like, "Is there room in the bee world for another bee business?" And so we wanted to do a good job. So we started going to all the bee schools and all the meetings and everything we could get to learn more. And we literally went to that bee club in Indianapolis that I had been going to and stood up and said, we're going to start a bee club in Hamilton County. We're just going to start one
We're
because
just
we
gonna do it.
know we believe there's got to be enough beekeepers up here. And we put signs up at Starbucks and in the library. So we started the bee club and we were just going to make honey. That was our goal. So we went to every function at the state level, every field day, all the things, and just wanted to be good beekeepers. But still, the Hive Butler was still a couple of years out. So
Yeah. So what was it? So you jumped in head first. You get out
yes,
there. You decide you're
yeah,
doing this. You're going to run with it. You start
yeah,
the club. The club has been very successful and is still going today.
it is.
Actually, from our side conversation, sounds a lot smoother and more organized than other clubs that I've been a part of.
Well,
So
I
kudos for
feel very.
that.
Well, thank you, and I will not take credit for it. I will say I might have kicked the snowball down the hill or whatever, but I just have this core group of people that sort of glommed on, and we have no officers, we have no organizational structure other than we have a bank account and people's names are on it. And we just get along, and everybody brings their talent, their particular talent. And there's enough of us in that group that if you're not there, it's okay. There's enough of us to carry the load. And
Yeah.
again, as the only child, it's wonderful to me because I have gotten these people who have been close to me for years and years now that I just love. And so, and because of my travels with the Hive Butler, I recognize that not every club runs that way.
Yes.
And it's we're lucky. So I do appreciate those people and the work that they do. But yep.
Yeah, when I've had the honor of actually getting to speak to your club virtually
Yes.
during the kind of the tail end of the pandemic, so
Yeah.
that was very nice to get to meet everybody and see it. And it's kind of a cool way. I mean, it sucks because I love traveling and going in person,
Right. Right.
but at least you still get to have these interactions with the other people if you
Right.
do it virtually. So that was pretty cool. But
So,
the
funny side story. I was at the North Carolina State Beekeepers meeting in what's it? That really cool town. And that weekend, they had a workshop on how to do digital stuff with beekeeping, and they introduced this amazing new technology called Zoom. Okay, now no joke. So they introduced Zoom, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so amazing!" I went home and that was like March 20th, and they came out and said, "We're locking down the world." That weekend, like
yeah.
within 24 hours of me learning the word Zoom. So look where we are now. It was very amazing, that whole flow.
Yeah.
So
It's actually crazy. I've ran into you in person a few times, mostly in
uh-huh.
Texas at some of the events that we had down there. But I also want to say that I randomly ran into you in Georgia at the Young Harris Institute.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember
Yeah.
the year, but that was right before the pandemic as well. It was kind of
I was there a couple years. It's such a little show, but so nice. I mean,
oh, it's
the
gorgeous up
venue
there.
is wonderful. Dr. Barry had us allowed us to come, and yep, it was a lovely conference. I've liked it many times.
Yeah, I had the honor to be able to go and do that. I loved it. It was a blast and gorgeous country. Like
Yes,
just
absolutely.
beautiful out there, the
Is
blue.
that the one that's right by? Is that by Augusta, the golf course? Is that?
No, this one is it's up there in the mountains, right at the edge of
Oh
the
yeah.
Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
it's they've got their own college little campus basically
Right,
set
I
up,
remember
and
the
you go from
college because
building to
yeah,
building. Yeah,
yeah, my husband loves old architecture, so I was taking pictures, all those buildings are
yeah.
beautiful, it was very nice.
Yeah, it was very cool up there. So now transitioning over here real quick from because
Yes,
we're talking about traveling and I've seen you in these different places. And the reason I have seen you is because somehow your beekeeping and your club and all this other I never wanted to do it evolved into a legitimate beekeeping business. You created
yes,
the Hive Butler.
I did.
And what was your initial we need something different? Like what was that aha moment that kicked you off and going?
You know what? It was pretty close to the beginning, okay?
That deep full of honey.
That first year, that super full of honey or that deep full of honey, I pulled out that frame and I was like, "Oh my gosh, the treasure. It's here. We did it," or "They did it." And then I was like, "What do I put this in? That dirty cooler from last weekend or that flimsy office tote from China?" And we literally, I remember Tom and I both sitting there going, "How is it possible that there's not something for honey? Honey is this treasure. We can't recreate it. How could?" And we scoured the internet, stuff to hold, a device to hold honey. and my business partner at that time, Karen, same thing. We're all like trying to figure this out. And of course, my husband, as husbands do, well, you think you can make something better? You should do that. And in a nice way, in a nice
Okay.
way. And I was like, oh, well, bleh. And so, another amazing timing. We went on, so we came up with the idea. We want to make this tote box. We want it to be super heavy duty, big handles. We wanted it to hold 10 frames, and yeah, long story about that. But anyway, we decided we'll go on crowdfunding. We'll go on Kickstarter. Well, guess what had just been on Kickstarter? The Flow
I was getting
Hive.
ready to say, yeah. And that was a
The Flow
big
and
deal.
my understanding of the Flow Hive is that they wanted to make their goal was $70 or $75,000, and they made 13 million in the first 24 hours.
I know.
So on one hand, I thought, well, this could be really good. People are aware of bees, but the Flow Hive doesn't have frames that it pulls out and puts into
Right.
something. So then I was like, ooh. So we started with a crowdfunding platform and made a tiny bit of money. And then we just decided, and we met with a patent attorney about our idea. And then we just decided we're just going to go to conferences with a poster and tell them what we want it to be and see what
Hey.
people say. And the Beekeepers of Indiana, which wasn't that at that time, they were gracious enough to let us come literally with a laminated poster on a table with a picture saying, this is what we want to make. And we don't have the money to do it, and we'll take deposits. And we thought, let's see what the feedback is.
Yeah.
People just handing us cash.
Wow.
And so then we're like, okay, well, let's go up to Michigan to their conference. Did the same thing. People were just all about it. And we said, I can't even remember if, I think we had figured out we wanted a ventilated lid at the very beginning so that they could use it in the bee yard. And so people just, the feedback was 80% plus. Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. So when you were doing that, were you also sourcing opinions and ideas too? Like, what would you like to see in a product like this, or did you guys already have it pretty much?
I don't think we were that aware that we needed to do that. People wanted something to hold their honey. They didn't like their honey leaking out on the floor of the truck, the barn, the garage, the kitchen. Um, and then when we came up with this idea that there would be a ventilated version of the lid and you could use it in the bee yard, well, there's a product that you can use all year round. And then of course, storing your drawn comb in the off season, it just made sense.
Yeah.
And also for us personally, we didn't have enough woodware to bring in a whole super. The wooden box needed to stay out there and keep working.
Right.
So we were pulling individual frames using Dole pineapple boxes or whatever you could find, but it made sense to a lot of hobbyist beekeepers. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it's very common that people with an idea that they pursue look back and say, had I known what it was all going to be about, I might not have tried. And we literally, in the very beginning, said, how hard can it be to make a box? So
Lots of trial and error. I'm
if I could
assuming went into
slap,
that. Yeah.
if I could slap that girl, I would do it.
Oh, oh dear. But I mean, you were persistent, you persevered, you saw it through, and now you actually have this business where you've got kind of multiple things you can do with the box and little things that you could put on to
Absolutely.
change the use.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you've actually been able to take that and run with it and grow with it, which is very commendable. And at the same time, it's also a good lesson for anybody out there who is looking at starting their own business, regardless what it is. It all has to
One
start with a concept, a need, and an
100
idea.
100%. And if we had 6 hours, I would tell you the full story. I mean, there was a first iteration that and we took the money from people in multiple states and held it. We did not spend their money. We did find an investor. That's a whole miracle on its own. And we made the first iteration of the Hive Butler, and those molds epically failed. They might have made
Oh,
200 parts. We delivered all the ones they made, and then they completely failed. And then my friend and I amicably split. She wanted to go back to her life and not pursue this. And my husband and I and the investor felt strongly that we should go forward. And so the one you see now is the second version, which was great. I mean, first of all, it was an epic dark year of refunding money. I refunded everybody's money that wanted it. I had it, so I
Yeah.
refunded it. But literally 80% of people would send me, they would reply and say, no, I love that you have this idea and I'm willing to wait. If
Yeah.
you're going forward, I will wait. And it was just so, so charming. And so then we had to figure out how to start from scratch again. But then we could correct all the flaws we saw in the first one. We could make changes. Um, and again, we connected with a whole nother set of people to help us produce it. We didn't go with other people.
Yeah.
So it was a long process. And now I'm so happy that I stuck it out.
Yeah.
I just love hearing from customers. I love when I'm at a conference and customers stick their head into the people and say, it's my favorite thing. I really like it. I mean, that it just, I can't tell you, especially having gone through the dark year of writing the refund checks
Yeah.
over and over and over. Yeah, it's great.
Well, I mean, it's like anything. They say, failure is really just another opportunity to succeed and to
Fail
correct and amend.
forward.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's,
There's, yeah.
hey, kitty, kitty.
So
I
fail
have mine
forward.
locked away so they can't come down and bother
Well,
me.
I might have to do that. I might have to do that. But if you're not failing, you're not trying, right? So
Right.
there's always going to be failure. At the time it happened, we were just devastated. We just thought, oh my gosh, this is not going to work.
Yeah, but
Um,
you learned all of those interesting little nuances, how to make those contacts, and then like
yep.
you said, when you started that second round, now you had the information to base that off of and to be able to go through
Right.
and change that
Well,
and
and
fix
I
those little
remember
things.
calling. I remember. So we had an engineer design the second one. We found out the first designer was not an engineer. So we had an engineer and we met with him with the original version, and we had a laundry list of all the things it had to do and what and it has to be beautiful. I said it has to be interesting and look nice. But I remember calling him and saying, "Oh, wait, I need an inch and a half below a deep frame. It needs to the deep frame cannot hit the bottom or be." And he's like, "Oh, that'll cost you money." And I was like, "Why?" And he goes, "Oh, well, the box is going to be an inch and a half taller all the way around. That's more plastic. That means the mold has to be bigger. That's steel. And that means it has to run in a bigger press."
Oh,
He's like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "I'm 100% sure. I have to have it."
yeah,
And of course, we had to pick one size,
right. Because you
right? I
can't
only
have
had
multiple
money,
molds and issue one of your
right?
best. Yeah.
The mold that makes the tote weighs 23,000 pounds,
Holy crap.
of mostly steel and runs in an 1,100-ton press, which is the size of a school bus.
Man.
Yeah, and those aren't everywhere.
No,
Um,
no.
right. So people are always like, "Oh, can't you make one that holds mediums?" I'm like, "No,
Yeah,
no."
no. Your mediums can just be way off the bottom.
They're like,
Like,
"Oh, but it's so much wasted space." I'm just like, "I can't help you."
it's multifunctional. You just have to, be creative with it.
That is right. That is right.
No, that is actually a very good thing to know too, because this is not even remotely the same aspect, but in another life, I did screen printing for t-shirts.
Okay.
And every time you would burn a screen, that was it. It was permanent. And, that's how it was. And if you did that as a one-off, like probably the worst job I ever accepted was doing jerseys for a softball team. That was 25 one-time use only frames.
Oh my gosh.
And once you've got that frame, and when I say frame, I'm talking it's a silk screen frame, so a wooden
Right.
frame with
Right.
a very fine silk mesh in it. But
Right.
you put a photo emulsion over it, and then you put your image over it to block where you don't want the light to go.
Right.
You hit it with a high intensity light, it develops the photo emulsion everywhere the light can touch, but your image blocks what is going to
Right.
then be transferred through. But
Right.
once you're done, you're done. And so you've spent all that time, all that money, all that effort into something. So you don't want to have a ton of options, because if somebody only buys them every once in a while, you're never going to recoup the cost on that
Oh my
screen. So,
goodness.
and
Oh
that's
my
just wood and
goodness.
silk. That's not steel and, machinery the size of buses to compress
Oh
them,
yeah. Oh
like,
yeah. That first set of molds that failed, went to scrap.
Yeah.
It went to scrap, and it was a very high purchase price, and we got about $1,000 out of it for
Oh
scrap.
man, just the cost of the metal basically recycled.
Oh, yeah, and I will say people were so nice. I mean, like, the reason I say this is where the molds ended up. Those people got it to scrap for me, I didn't even pay them,
Yeah.
and I got this check in the mail, and I was just like, and of course, it was someone else's money, right, that I had invested in that,
Right.
and then I was just like,
Right.
it
What
was
do we do
it was
now?
hard. It was hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, talk about seeing it through. That's sometimes is a good lesson. Even in beekeeping itself, when you first start
Very
off,
much.
you're gonna have to put your head down and see it through. Get the learning, get the education. If you mess
Well,
up, pivot, learn
and
from
how
it, and move forward.
how many of us have overwinter losses,
Oh
right? It
God,
just
yeah.
right. So it's and especially I've started telling people now the learning curve in beekeeping is steep and expensive.
Yep.
You need to not just wing it and use Facebook. What are all my favorite things? You just need to you need to educate yourself and find your local community. Those people can drag you up the hill at the beginning when you really need it. So yeah, beekeeping is sort of like that. But you're absolutely right. The only failure is in not trying.
Right. Not trying or giving up.
Not trying.
If you can
Right.
look at it and you can legitimately see ways that you can change and modify something and try again, and then if that gets you further down the road, but there's still maybe
Right.
some other things you got to change,
Right.
then you pivot and you do it again.
Right.
Ultimately, you will get to your goal. But if you never try at all, you're not going to know.
Right. This is what
So
I still have one daughter left at home. She's 20. My daughters are 30, 25, and 20. And I tell my 20-year-old, don't be paralyzed by perfection.
that's true.
No job you're going to pick is going to be the perfect job. So this whole idea that I'll wait until the timing is perfect or my life is perfect,
Yeah.
it's just
There's never the right time or the right opportunity, especially if
right.
you're in that mindset, because something's always going to come up. Oh, well,
Absolutely.
this is happening next week, so I'm going to wait, or
Yep.
that's happening next month, or I really, there's always going to
Yep.
be something. So you just have to kind of bite down and go with it at some point, make that
Well,
commitment and jump in.
I love to encourage people who have ideas, and I think beekeepers particularly are innovative. They're just always trying to figure out a way to make things better or to do a better job. And I say, if you lay in bed at night and think about that idea, you should pursue it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because 10 years from now, you're going to say, I wish I'd have really checked into that. So check into it now
Yeah.
because I think the people who do pursue an idea are the minority.
Hmm.
I think lots of people have lots of ideas, and for pity's sake, the pet rock made money, so, I
That's true.
mean
That's very true. And it's still around. That was around
right.
eons ago and it's still there. My sister used to do that actually when she was younger too. So yeah, that's funny. So I love that. Pet rock, man. Come on. If a pet rock can do it, you can too.
Come on.
So I have kind of a scenario where my youngest nephew, he was like that. He was very imaginative. He was always dreaming things up, and he came up one day with a couple of different ideas that literally made sense. They sounded plausible, but he was just a young kid. He didn't really know what to do with
Right,
it. And it was just kind of this pipe dream. And there was an interesting lesson in that where I kind of think anything that you put out into the universe, like if you start putting enough thought and energy into it, it is eventually going to manifest. The question is it going to do it with you, or is it
right,
going to float off somewhere else and attach to somebody else and they're going to see it
right,
through? And in
right.
his instance, both of the things that he had come up with about 5 to 7 years later suddenly became a real thing. And he
Oh
was
my
so
gosh.
mad. He was so mad. He was like, that
Oh
was my
my
idea.
gosh.
They stole my idea. And I was like, but technically they didn't, because you didn't really ever put it down anywhere. You didn't like, share it online. That didn't exist back then, so it was just the simple fact that, there is this concept out there and eventually it's going to find a way to come into fruition. And yeah,
That same thing happened to my daughter when she was in a homeschool group. They had to come up with an invention of something, and and I can't remember if it was specifically a food, but hers was a food, and it was a marshmallow with chocolate inside it like a s'more. So when you
Yeah.
roasted it, you'd have it, and they do make those now. And
And that's a
so
thing.
when she thought of it, she must have been like 12.
Yeah.
And they just came out a couple years ago because she's like running in the house. They have my idea.
It really exists. It's here. Yeah. 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 He was very upset by that.
Oh, I bet, I bet, and I think particularly people should pay attention to children who are of that age still where they're not inhibited by what other people will think. I
Right.
think they can have amazing ideas, that people should listen to more often than they do.
Well, that's actually a good adage for a lot of things in life, but even in your beekeeping journey, right? If something resonates with you, say
Yes.
for instance, let's say hive styles. If there is a
Right.
specific hive style that resonates with you and you're drawn to that, but then you go to the club and either nobody's heard of it or they all don't have anything good to say about it or nobody's experienced it, that shouldn't necessarily hinder that individual from pursuing what interests them.
I
You
agree.
know, move forward with it so long as you're happy and you're doing it. That's all that really matters. And you just take the pieces that seem like they resonate with you, you put them into your toolbox and let the other stuff go. And
I can agree with that on most levels until we get to sort of mite stuff,
well,
and
that's
but
that's beekeeping as far as the actual biology of the bee and the ins and outs of what you should do
right,
management style wise.
right, and
But
so
you can
as a
adapt
club
management to anything, right?
right, and as a club leader who meets with lots and lots of hobbyist beekeepers, and everybody has sort of their image of how it's gonna go or what they wanna do, I do try to steer them at least in the I say, "First become a good beekeeper,
Yes.
then you can go off on these little tangents of different types, but in the beginning, work with what your mentor is find someone who's successful, do what they're doing until you become routinely knowledgeable and successful. Then you can start experimenting. But this whole idea that, and I find this a lot in the homestead community. I'm trying to break into the homestead community. I think they get a lot of bad teaching, but what I find with them is they particularly are not going to go to a bee conference because they have dairy cattle and goats and
That's
20 other
true.
things going on.
They can't leave the
And
house. Yeah.
so th- um, they are always like, oh, we don't want to have any treatment free. It's like, first, just keep bees alive.
Right, right. Step
Okay.
one.
Literally. And and so I think they gravitate toward thinking that, oh, bees keep themselves, or I can just there's a guy out there who actually teaches, and I very politely questioned him on Instagram last year. He actually teaches if you don't see anything out of the norm going on at the front of your hive, you do not need to get into it. And I said, and I thought, okay, I am not, I don't want to be Karen, but I'm going to ask this. And I said, so a queenless hive will put up honey all day, nectar all day long. They will just work. You will not see anything different. And when you get in there, and so I said to him, so a queenless hive would continue to bring in, you'd never notice, and then you'd get in there and you'd be queenless, and it could be too late in the year. And he said, well, if they can't fix it themselves, then we don't want those kind of bees in our yard. And I said, wait. You're telling me that if their virgin queen went out on her mating flight and got hit by a bus, which I was a school bus driver and I hit a swarm, so I can say this,
It happens.
it did, and it was my swarm. Okay, it was
Oh
right in my neighborhood.
no.
Oh yeah, here I am driving the bus. I'm like, oh my gosh, no way. Oh my gosh, that is a swarm of bees. Boom on that windshield. So anyway, so I said, so you're legit telling me that if the Virgin Queen didn't make it back for whatever reason, you are going to let that colony dwindle and die rather than either buying a queen or putting open. And he said, yep. And I said, I turned to my friends, beekeepers, and said, it would take more work to clean out a dead out than it would to save the entire colony in the season through various
Yeah.
available means. I just couldn't believe it. So that's what I so anyway, that
No,
back to the point.
I wholeheartedly agree with that aspect because you can't really tell what's going on from there, right? Even at certain points in time of the year, there may be a lot of drones. Are there a lot of drones because they're wealthy and healthy and they're multiplying, or there are a lot of drones because the queen died, they went laying worker, and there's not anything else going on.
Right.
Like, until you open it and look inside, you can't answer the questions because you don't even have the parameters as to what am I looking at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love teaching beekeepers and mentoring beekeepers, and I tell people, if you like to read mystery books, beekeeping is for you because you're cracking the lid and going, "What happened here? How do
Right.
I know? And what should I do about it?" I
The
mean,
CSI
it's
investigation.
yes, yes.
That is absolutely, that's a great analogy because it's very much crime scene investigation. And if you wait too long, the evidence is gone.
That
So
is right, and
that's
I tell, homesteaders particularly, there's a great upside to bees. There's no poop shoveling, there's no fences, no water tanks, so many things. However, they are the only livestock that are planning. They're
that's right.
planning, okay? The cow is not planning. She just wants the next meal, and that's it, okay? But bees got an agenda. They
Yeah.
got
And they may not only planning, they may be plotting against you.
well, I don't say that because it's too scary.
They're like, wait, what? That it's
Yeah.
literally thinking on purpose about me? No. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that whole scenario. There's been many times even here on the podcast where you'll get new beekeepers that are coming into it. They may be very fascinated with the treatment free aspect of stuff, but say you only have one hive and that hive has a problem. And if the problem is related to mites, you're not going to know, number one, unless you do a mite check. So you got to have that information. And then number two, if you do find that, yes, there is a high mite load and a lot of symptoms that could go hand in hand with that, what do you do? Well, it's up to that individual because if you can't stomach the thought of that hive may die, then intervene and do something. If that means treating that hive, treat that hive because until you have more hives to experiment with and more knowledge,
Right?
you're not necessarily ever going to make it past the starting gate. It's going to
Well,
be stop and
and
repeat.
bottom line to me as a mammal owner, I have lots of mammals and I love them and they mean a lot to me. And I treat them for parasites.
Right.
There are multiple known methods. I've watched Jamie Ellis pound the pulpit and say there are multiple known methods to treat mites spanning the spectrum from organic to synthetic.
Right.
Pick
Do
one.
something. Right. Do
Pick
something.
one. You can even use mechanical methods if you're super spot on with your timing, but pick something. Are you going to sit around your dog is being just ruined by fleas and you're going to say, "Well, I'm waiting for him to genetically overcome them." I mean, come on. Literally, literally. It's
That's a
not
visual.
it's not fair,
It
right?
is
It's
not.
not
Yeah.
fair to the bees. You have brought them to your property and put them in that little barn. It is up to you to protect them and provide for them. And all you have to do is go to what is that pollinator the bee informed partnership
Right.
and they have all the charts and all the data and all the things. Pick one. Really,
Yeah.
really. Just from a compassion standpoint.
Yeah. Do something. And that is
Yes.
kind of the bigger thing. The front porch beekeeping, watching them come and go, not doing anything, and then saying, oh, well, they failed because of this. I mean,
And I don't want them. If they can't solve it, I don't want them. It's like,
right. So you're not
really?
you're not really a beekeeper. You're not even really a bee haver. I don't know what you would fall into that category at that
I don't
point, but
I don't either. I just I wish I could pull homestead beekeepers out and just say, "You guys, just go to one bee conference a year," but it's more serious. It's not something that you can just ignore. Of course, I did for a year and they succeeded, so
yep. I
I
had a
was lucky
gentleman.
though, right?
Yeah, I had a gentleman that here recently. He's part of the local bee club, one of the co-founders here with me, and he did beekeeping in the past, got out of it for a
Okay.
little bit, decided he wanted to get back into it, and we have started programs with both of the local schools.
Okay.
And the one school, they had their ag teacher got the program started, got it funded, got everything in, and then the teacher left. And
Ah,
so the new ag teacher that came in, she was like, I know how to feed them and I know how to wrap it up for winter. And that's the extent of my bee knowledge. So they hadn't touched them all season. And when we
Oh,
finally like figured out what was going on, made all the connections that we needed to actually get involved and get out there and help, we go to this hive. They had one hive that survived, and that sucker was literally just exploding with bees. I mean, they were doing fantastic.
coming out
And
every
yeah, and my associate was just livid. He was like, "I've done everything I should, and my bees are barely hanging on, and these have been abandoned, and they're just going crazy." He was like, "I feel like a failure."
so funny. But the variables are so many. You can't mark, who knows
Well,
what.
and they had 3, and only one of those 3 survived.
Right.
And that
Right.
one is doing fantastic, but the other 2 obviously did not.
Man,
So,
take the queen cells off of that one, right? I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
genetics, get those genetics.
Exactly. Well, and that was with your scenario about like, well, what if the queen flew off and then didn't come back? We've had that problem a lot this year up here where I'm at. I
Interesting.
literally like 75% of the colonies that went through a process of requeening, she never made it back. And I
Wow.
would go through it and I'd be like, well, we've had really bad weather. We've had lots of rain. We've had all these
Right.
things.
I'll
Let
wait.
me
I'll
give her
wait.
another week. Let me
Right.
see.
Right.
And then eventually I'd get to that point where I'm like, well, crap. I'm gonna go get a comb that has eggs and larvae, and I'm gonna put it in there
Right.
and just see because maybe she's there. And
Right.
if she is, they're not gonna do nothing. But if she's not, they'll start queen cells, and they'd immediately
Right.
start queen cells. And I'm like, man. And so it was
Wow.
like 2 or 3 attempts to get a colony where it should be. And I don't
Right.
know. We have tanagers here, the birds that like to eat bees,
Oh, uh-huh, right.
and
Oh, I
so
forgot about them.
yeah. So, but it hasn't been a problem in the past several years. Why all
Okay.
of a sudden this year, and they're spread out, they're not all in one yard. So I'm like,
Wow.
how am I having the same problem? And that person's having that problem, and this person's having that problem. What is it with this season and this year that is
Right.
causing the queens not to make it back? Is it the weather? Is it something else going on? Is there an influx of a specific predator that maybe we didn't have that many of last year? I don't know, but it has not been a good year for virgin queens where I'm at.
We had a weird queen year last year. So my new thing, if you've looked at my Instagram, it's not new. My now 2-year-old obsession pretty much is two frame mating nukes.
Yeah, I saw
Two
you had a
frame
bunch of
mating
them.
nukes. Yes, and it's magic, okay? Well, last year, not a one of them succeeded, not a
Oh
one. And
man.
I was like, "Wow, what am I doing wrong?" And but then I started asking around, of course, and my beekeeper friends in many counties, "Oh, it's just a weird queen year. It's just a weird." So it wasn't just the mating nukes; it was just requeening like that. So I don't know if it was. I'm gonna assume it was weather related, just so much rain and they couldn't get out, or the drone areas weren't good, or whatever. But this year, boom, 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 they're just all my mating nukes took off well, and so yeah,
Yeah, and the weather actually is a very good scenario for us potentially this year because we've had severe storms back to back to back, which have been tearing up all kinds of stuff.
right.
But at the same time, we didn't hardly get any of the rain that we should have in March and April. And then all of a
Oh,
sudden in May, it wouldn't stop raining. And
wow.
so we would run into these situations where we had colonies that were doing kind of premature swarming because they had been trapped inside there for a whole
Oh,
week of
right,
rain.
right.
So they start raising queen cells. And then, like you said, you may only have a day or two of clear, beautiful days. They swarm, you catch them, you do something with them, but now that colony's got to raise a new queen and she
Or
doesn't make it
or
back.
those 2 beautiful days, you, then end up having to do some family thing, and you have
Right.
no idea that it happened at all.
Yep. Till you come
And
back
you're
and
just
you
like,
look and you're like, wait a minute, where'd they go? And what are these? And that's not right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's been a very interesting kind of challenging scenario for sure this season. Every year brings its different challenges, and that's one of the things too, though, that kind of actually kind of goes back to that CSI mindset or that mystery mindset.
right.
It keeps you on your toes. You're always learning. You're always having to adapt and change to fit the seasons and Mother
It
Nature
is.
and the bees and
And we talk about that, our club leadership. So we started offering Beekeeping 101 every month. If there are people there that want to go to it, we take them in a separate area and do Beekeeping 101. And we did that because our state only has one bee school a year and it's in February. Well, guess what? Lots of people don't think about beekeeping in February. They think about it during the summer and even the fall.
yeah,
And so we were like, we need to start. So we started doing that, and that works really well. So we just always have a beginner kit and a volunteer ready to do that. Well, now we're starting to realize that we've gotten a lot of people started well, but second year beekeeping is almost more complicated because you know enough or you have enough stuff. So now we're also going to start offering beekeeping 201 because we feel like there's some sophomore beekeepers and even third year that have holes in their education, as we all do. And even though we're having great speakers, they just kind of need a triage question answer with experienced beekeepers. So we're trying to help them. Our goal, of course, is to make sustainable beekeepers that you can keep yourself going. You should not be buying bees every year.
That's right.
So we're trying to adapt to that as club leadership. Who are we not serving? We can't just always be giving beginner information, and at the same time the beginners can't sit in this lecture very scientific. Randy Oliver, we've had him as well. So yeah, trying to meet all those needs. And of course then every month different people come, so
Yeah, yeah, it's a revolving door.
it is.
Yep. I think my current frustration with some new beekeepers, it kind of depends on what's going on with them, but we've got an individual here locally that has zero knowledge of bees whatsoever, but all of a sudden her and her husband decided we're getting bees. And so the bees showed up and they're out there and they have no idea what to do. And they love to hammer the Facebook page with questions for the club, but they won't show up to a single meeting.
Yeah.
And we're like, you guys, come to a meeting, and actually learn the things that you need so that you can be ahead of the game instead of reacting all the time and trying to catch up. Won't
Well,
come to a meeting.
incredibly frustrating, and wow, that I'm not sure that I would be able to take it. But and what I hammer to people is don't come to the club just for the lecture or the lesson. Come for the networking.
That's true too.
Find a person who talks the way you listen. Find a successful beekeeper in this group of people that you think you'd like to that you would get along with or you would want to hang out with, because those are the people that end up you text a picture saying, "Does this look normal to you?" You have to find a little tribe within the tribe.
Yeah.
And those local people are almost more valuable than any teaching, because they're experiencing the weather that you're experiencing and the flora and the availability of the sources. And there's always people aging out, moving away, and making splits that they don't want to keep. I say bee math is like chicken math, man.
It is.
Once you kind of got the mite thing under control, pretty soon you're just like, okay, I really don't need 12.
That's
and,
right.
and so get connected. They're also going to tell you, don't buy nukes from him because they all failed. And these guys really stand behind their bees, or this guy makes great queens. And you're never going to know that if you don't go to the meeting.
That's right.
So
You learn a lot when you're there, and that networking is a huge part of that for
it is
sure.
a huge part of it.
Yep.
Huge.
So there you go, everybody. Go to your meetings.
Your club leaders are trying to do a good job. And I say that, but then people are like, I literally had someone at a conference tell me recently, they went to the club meeting. I think this was it was not in Indiana, but went to the club meeting and they all just told me it was really hard and I shouldn't even try. And she was not joking. I was like, why would you have a club that talks people out of trying? I couldn't. And she was like, I know. It was really depressing. Nope.
That's kind of shocking.
Okay, guys, we're gonna form a bee club and we're gonna tell everybody don't try.
Don't do
We
it.
don't want competition.
Don't do it. I do know, I don't remember who it was I was talking to. I do know an individual that was telling me the story about how they do go through a whole process of here's all the things. And, if you're not scared away and you're still interested at the end of this lecture, then by all means, let's get started and let's move forward with this. But it was more of a, I think maybe to weed out,
Yeah,
the
the
individuals
lookers.
who, looky-loos that were not really going to be serious and commit,
Right.
or the people that really honestly thought, the whole, well, I bought a flow hive and I put it in my yard and I haven't seen a single bee. Weed those guys out. Let them know there's a little bit more to it than just putting it on your property.
I tell people to invest in a suit. Buy
Yep.
a ventilated suit, squat all the way down while you have it tried on, And then go to your bee club and say, hey, could I come help you?
Yeah,
Which is more like, can I just shadow you? If the most investment you've made is the suit, and then you go and you literally cannot do it, or you recognize that you have that fear level, that's a pretty small investment. And you can then, sell the suit on Facebook Marketplace. Don't buy the woodware and the bees and all that until you have really gone and been in a yard and worked with people and seen how hot and heavy and get stung.
that's right. Because
And then
it's a time commitment. It is a money commitment. There's a lot that is involved with it. Like, it would behoove you to have all of that information so you can make the informed decision
yes,
about what should I do and is this
people are
really for me?
people are so fixated on the pain of getting stung, and that is the least of the problems that you're going to face in beekeeping. We have, people that we had a beginner that our club was helping, and for lots of things happened, and the bees ultimately left, they absconded, and she literally said, I actually thought bees just keep themselves. You're like, have we not, did you not hear anything we said? And she has come back now and has come into club, and she's like, I learned my lesson. She thought she could easily, oh, I'll just get a queen and stick it in there. It's like, there's so much more to it. And I love beekeepers because I think most of them want to help. They want to give advice. I mean, I get it, 10 opinions, 5 beekeepers,
Right,
all of
right.
that, but they, for the most part, are friendly and want to help and want to do a good job. And beekeeping is one of the few things you can do as a hobby that isn't just good for you and yours. It's good for the people around you. It's good for the ecosystem around you. And that just makes it all the more rewarding because it's not just putting honey on my table.
Right. So that kind of that actually it almost kind of answers, but that cues us up for our little question here that we've been asking each of our guests. And that
Okay.
is, how do you feel about the current state of beekeeping today? Do you feel like we still need more new beekeepers getting involved? Do you feel like it's being oversaturated? Like, where do you fall in that mix?
I'm totally fine with more new beekeepers coming in because most of them are not, at least half of them aren't going to stick with it. Okay. So the rule of attrition, just keep them coming because people are going to age out and move away. Plus, I believe the demographics of existing beekeepers were very age heavy. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we need people coming in. So I'm totally fine with more coming in, and I am lucky to live in a fairly affluent county. My county is just north of Indianapolis, and data wise, it is the 15th per capita income county in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Now, when I moved here, it was nothing, and I'm not rich. I'm just saying,
You just
I'm
got in the
aware.
door early.
Well, my husband reminds me that our county is this golden nugget, not the norm. So I
Right.
get that. And I think that's why my club is, we have the benefit of having people who love beekeeping and can afford to be beekeepers. That being said, I think we should accept all beekeepers because most of them will end up moving on to something else, and we need them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That works. That is a perfectly acceptable answer, and it does make sense. There, at one point in time, when I was the president of the local club in Austin for the Travis County Beekeepers, I addressed everybody in the room and told them that it was a very discouraging thing for me to be the youngest person in the room when I wasn't really that young anymore. And we
right,
need to get some of these younger people in there because everybody in this room is just getting older. And you're eventually going to, like you said, age out. You may retire, you may quit. It may get to where you can't physically do it anymore, especially if
right,
it's heavy
right,
boxes that you're moving.
right,
So
right.
we got to get those younger people involved to
Yep.
see if it fits for them, to see if they like it, because even if you bring 10 in and only one of them stays, you're going to need every one of those one to replace all of these people
Right.
that are, 60, 70, and 80 that are sitting there listening to the presentation.
So I mean, in reality, any niche group that we're talking about, is there anybody that should be turning away people? Probably not.
Probably not. If you want to keep it at some some level, definitely not. I think the big problem that we had with it was Texas did the farm bill and the bee law, and they made them available for ag exemptions. And then we started
So
having population problems and overdensity and issues like that.
So do you feel like I'm aware of that, and I feel like now there's a lot of people keeping bees on farms for other people. So do you feel like that's balanced out now, or is that still just a
No.
Wild West? Wow.
It is still the Wild West down there. And the problem with it is that,
But can't you say that about dog breeders and horse
yeah,
people
yeah,
and
you could. Um, but I think the difference with this is not everybody could necessarily manage a certain head of cattle to get their ag exemption.
you are
But
correct.
everybody thinks, oh, well, I can put a few boxes out there and have bees and get my ag exemption, and then get into that whole thing without really knowing what's involved and what's going to be needed. But what the counties ended up doing was they turned around and they said, too many people are applying. We need to make it harder. And so they started raising the number of hives
Oh,
required per
no.
acre. And so you end up in a scenario where you could have 10 hives or 20 hives per every 10 acres. And if you and your neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor's neighbor all
Wow.
get into it, well, now you got 100 hives and you might be on 50 acres of land or less.
Wow. Well, and
So,
I understand the initial goal is that bees are livestock and they are a legit agricultural thing, so I get it.
yeah, it just, that
And
was the
who knew
unintended consequence of what was
right,
going to happen
who
with it.
knew it would take off like that?
Yeah. But it
Because
became,
because no fences, no water tanks, no
that's
manure
right, right.
piles,
All the
right?
other stuff. I used to tell people at the club when they would come up and they would ask, like, well, what's involved with beekeeping and stuff. And I'd say, well, I mean, if you can garden, you could keep bees. If you can go out once a week and you could tend to the garden and you could truly tend to the garden, make sure that it's watered, make sure
Right.
that it's got the nutrition, pull the weeds. That's about your time commitment as far as what you're going to be doing with the hive. But there's a lot of knowledge that goes into that. All the biology of the bee, the ebb and flow of the cycles, all this other stuff. That's
Yeah,
what's
and
going to fill up all the rest of your time is
well,
learning.
and I think you could pull up on any road anywhere and pick the 5 neighbors in a row, and all 5 of them are not gonna be diligent,
Right.
astute, interested, motivated. I mean, it's not possible. It's not possible.
Yep.
So, yeah, so you guys got a perfect storm kinda there
It
of
did, yeah, it definitely did, and then it turned into this just absolute monster, of a scenario where you wind up with, there are more bees, managed colonies in the state of Texas at any given point in time because of the ag exemption laws
right, right, right.
than there are all of the southern states combined. It's
Wow.
ridiculous. You're talking like the
So
difference between 1,000 colonies and 8,000 colonies.
and that just makes me think about, and I wish we could solve moving 1,000,000 colonies into California.
Right.
Why can't California have enough bees to take care of what they need to do?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful state, there's lots of resources. Why do we have to move 1,000,000 colonies? Why?
That's an excellent question. That is something that we can talk about here in just a little bit.
Okay,
So we will table that, and we will transition that over to our Patreon episode for everybody out
okay.
there listening. If you want to join us and hear more with my chat with Tracy, then you can join us over on Patreon and learn a little bit more about this whole why do we got to move 1,000,000 bees across the country kind of scenario. 1,000,000 bee hives, not just bees.
Right. Oh, right, yeah, oh, yeah, far more than 1,000,000.
Okay, Tracy. So you've talked about how you started the business and all of the things that went into it. We've talked about what the actual Hive Butler container is. For anybody who hasn't actually seen it or heard of it, how can people go out there and actually find your website, find your Instagram, and learn more about you and about Hive Butler?
Well, thanks for asking. Of course, our website is thehivebutler.com. And it's just a very simple little store site. We do have a really small YouTube channel as well, The Hive Butler on YouTube, and they're videos of us using the products in all different ways, and gives you some ideas of things that you may not think about that they work really well for. For instance, our uncapping tank is wonderful. It's the biggest volume one on the market for the hobbyists, but the bottom of the uncapping tank tote is only modified with the honey gate. So you can take a ventilated lid and use the bottom of your uncapping tank all year long in the bee yard. So it's
Just
not
don't
sitting
open
on the
your honey
shelf.
gate.
Yeah, well, and you can use the honey gate for the stragglers after you've dropped the swarm in. It works great. But anyway, so lots of hacks on our little YouTube channel. We do have distributors in quite a few states, including 3 distributors in Texas now. So, and I'm hoping to get Charlie Beco as well out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
also, I saw your post, you also just got one in Arkansas as well.
Arkansas. I do. Central Beekeeper Supply in Arkansas, and just actually shipped pallets down to Foxhound Bee Company in Alabama.
Very nice.
Yeah.
You're
So,
growing. And
well,
this
and
means
that's
you
what,
don't have to travel as much.
well, and it's not even that so much. It's if I should have posted a picture today of my UPS drop out at the end of my driveway with 16 Hive Butler boxes.
Oh
So I'd
man.
like to stop retail shipping at some point, and my goal is to have good distributors in every state that I can just send people there. That would be wonderful. And speaking of that, Tom and I are driving to Idaho next week to be at the Modern Homesteading Conference in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So super excited. We will be driving across the country and stopping at my favorite place on the way home, Devil's Tower.
Ooh, very interesting. That's a fun. You actually spend a lot of time on the road. Like I was
I
looking
do.
at your list on your website of all the places
Oh,
that you were going to be, and there were
yeah.
places that weren't on there that you still were at.
Oh,
So,
well, and that list is so outdated because all I do is tape boxes together and ship things, which is fun. But yeah, so I was in Kansas 2 weeks ago,
yeah, you
and
were in
then
Lawrence.
Valerie and I were in Tennessee the week after that. I've been home for 2 weeks now. And we'll be out to Idaho, but I kind of don't have anything on the calendar for fall. So if anybody has a great beekeeping conference for fall, get in touch with me, Tracy at thehivebutler.com.
Thank you, Tracy, for joining us here today on the main segment platform. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it, of course. Let's talk again.
Oh, yeah. You and I are going to talk in just a minute. So, for everybody else, thank you for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, be good. And Miss Tracy, what do you got for
Well,
them?
well, I wish Natalie was here, but I'm going to say be a better beekeeper.
There you go. Be a better beekeeper. There's been a lot of things in this episode for you to sit down and digest and think about. Doesn't matter if you're thinking about starting beekeeping, if you've been in beekeeping for a while, if you're looking for a way to innovate and maybe find your own niche, maybe start your own business. There's lots of advice in here, lots of things to think about and consider. So definitely go back, listen to it again, digest all of that. And thank you again, Tracy. We greatly
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Of course. Thank you.
This Hive Jive production was made possible by amazing patrons like you, and we appreciate your support. To all our Hive Jive junkies out there, you truly are the bee's knees.